Hi, everybody. We're going to start the webinar in about 2 minutes. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar. We are a couple of reminders about today's webinar. It is going to be recorded. We're also live streaming on YouTube, so recording is going to be available immediately for you on the JFrog YouTube channel. If you do have any questions, please be sure to use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen because you all will be on mute. And today we're going to be talking about Chocolatey Package Manager for Windows with JFrog Artifactory. We've got two folks on the line, Rob Reynolds, who's the founder of Chocolatey, and Baruch Tadagurski, who's the JFrog developer advocate. And with that, Rob, I'd like to go ahead and let you take it away with the webinar.
All right, thank you. So I'm Rob. I am the creator and founder of Chocolatey, as mentioned, and have over 10 years experience in infrastructure automation. I'll let Baruch.
Hi, hello everybody, welcome. My name is Baruch. I'm the developer advocate with JFrog, and generally I do all things JFrog.
Fair enough. All right, so we're going to start out talking about JFrog. We're going to move into an overview of Chocolatey and then kind of talk about how the two hook together, and then go through a demo and Q&A, which is on there twice, apparently. So ignore that. All right.
So, well, just a very brief overview of Artifactory. You are JFrog webinar, so I expect you to know more about Artifactory than about Chocolatey. So we will definitely do the majority of the webinar about Chocolatey. So for any of you who didn't hear about Artifactory, it's a universal artifact repository. It can manage virtually every type of artifact that you care about, and that includes all the stack that you use for your development. Dependency managers such as Chocolatey, of course, NuGet, all the Java world, all the ops world like Chef, Puppet, Docker, obviously, etc., etc. And it integrates with all the majority CI servers such as Team Foundation server and Visual Studio CI server and Jenkins and many others. So it basically manages your binaries from the second they are converted to binaries from sources all the way that they go to production. And today we're going to talk about one type of binaries, and that's the Chocolatey packages. We take proud of all of our features, but the most important ones for you are reliability, including active, highly available clusters, disaster recovery, and generally ready for enterprise. For you, it provides reliability in terms of you not rely on external repositories anymore. You have or your all your packages proxied and stored and managed inside your own organization. Efficiency, all the artifacts are downloaded only once and then cached in Artifactory, and that's especially true for big artifacts like Chocolatey packages, but also for others. Security, you manage the access. You can have multiple repositories with different access models, so you can actually whitelist artifacts as they come from Artifactory to Artifactory, or you can blacklist some artifacts that you don't want, etc., etc., etc. Stability, well, if remote repositories are down, you couldn't care less because you have everything in your organization. And productivity, all that gives you basically productivity. And cross-platform installation. Artifactory is written in Java, and that means that it's cross-platform and runs on every operating system. And we have tons of installers for every possible combination that you want. You also don't have to install it at all. You can use one of our cloud offerings, either on Amazon or Google or Azure, depending on where the rest of your CI pipeline is. So obviously we are talking about Windows, so Azure will be a good choice. And you can just get instance as a service that we will manage for you on multi-tenant Azure cloud, and get all the benefits without any installation at all. This is the high-level diagram. You can see that Artifactory connects with CI servers, with dependency managers, and with the remote repositories for either downloading or deploying artifacts into it. So NuGet here along the dependency managers, and that means that it is Chocolatey compliant. So you can use Artifactory to proxy remote Chocolatey packages repositories and to manage your own Chocolatey artifacts. And Rob is going to talk about that most of the time, I guess, starting now. This is how the UI looks. That's a brand new installation that Rob just installed for the sake of the of this webinar. So this is why Artifactory is so happy to have 0 artifacts. It usually can go all the way to billions, and the biggest of our customers so far, more than 4,000 customers, have huge repositories usually. And then you can see that he actually went ahead and created one Chocolatey local repository that he's going to talk about as well.
All right. So starting in Chocolatey, a lot of people start to question, why would I look to Chocolatey when there are other options out there? The biggest question that we usually ask people is, when you install Windows, there's a lot more that you have to do with Windows to really get it set up. And that comes into software management. And software management is a big part of what you're doing on Windows. So you're configuring some of the aspects of Windows, and then a lot more of what you're doing with Windows over time has to do with installing and configuring software. There are lots of different installer formats in the wild, and zips and archives. You also have your own, possibly your own internal software, and really deploying all those out has traditionally different approaches to each of those. Where Chocolatey comes in, it has that more universal approach, right? And so when it comes to Chocolatey, it is offline and secure. By default, it does come hooked up to a community repository. That's the first thing that organizations shut off. Right, and so then they hook up their own internal repositories, likely Artifactory. And again, it's very flexible. It uses PowerShell to deliver that flexibility, so you can do pretty much anything you want as far as a Chocolatey package goes. It goes beyond programs and features, so there's a lot of software management tools out there. And a lot of them really stop at what's in programs and features, and Chocolatey doesn't. So it's able to manage those zip archives, be able to report on those as well. And also anything really you want to manage as far as packaging. It could be a configuration file, could be something else. All of that you're able to do with Chocolatey. So it does integrate with everything. It's been doing this for quite a while now. We've been up for about 6.5 years. And if you were to go about trying to recreate Chocolatey internally in your organization, it costs you a couple of dollars. So Taking a step back for a second, let's say, well, what is Chocolatey exactly? Chocolatey is about software management. It uses PowerShell and these fancy zip files that we call packages. And these packages are independent deployment artifacts that really allow you to take your deployments and your continuous delivery to the next level, right? We'll just start the shimmer there. As I was mentioning, it is a universal approach to managing all types of software management when it comes to Windows. And it does manages the entire software lifecycle. So it's not just about installs, but it's also about managing those upgrades over time. Possibly, if you want to, you can also manage those uninstalls as well very easily. And so again, just over 6 years using PowerShell and also being able to set up one or multiple repositories, all completely internal and all for free on the Chocolatey side. So when it comes to Chocolatey, there's really two approaches to deploying things. And one of those is through open source. And a lot of times with organizations, there's also Chocolatey for Business. And that open source side is very strictly about package management, which does work well in organizations. However, we see a lot of them building their own world around that, building a lot of tools and solutions, where Chocolatey for Business is a much more complete software management experience out of the box. A lot better system integration. We're adding endpoint management as well. We'll also have more visual interfaces for folks that are geared towards those types of ways of working with tools, and also features that are geared, again, specifically towards organizations. Now, some of those features you could probably build on the open source side. A lot of them you cannot. We focused really heavily on areas and integration into hook points into Chocolatey that you just can't do on the open source side. Chocolatey has been traditionally very much a command line tool. So this probably looks like a very familiar interface for anybody that is familiar with Chocolatey. And in more recent years, I bet you didn't know that we had a graphical interface called the Chocolatey GUI. A lot of people said we named this wrong. We should have called it GUI Chocolatey. I'm not sure what that's about, but there is that option as well. And you're able to, on the client, be able to manage those installations, be able to manage your configuration with Chocolatey itself. And so another thing that's exclusive to Chocolatey, we haven't even touched on any commercial features yet, so strictly open source so far. 9 times out of 10, when you install a package into Chocolatey, and that package installs software into programs and features, we call those installer packages. 9 times out of 10, when you install one of those, Chocolatey already knows how to uninstall that software without needing an uninstall script. All right, so we call that the auto uninstaller. Chocolatey does integrate with everything. I mean, pretty much anything that can run remote scripts, right? With Puppet, with Chef, with Ansible and SaltStack, those providers are managed by those organizations that are behind them. So we have a really tight integration with them. With PowerShell DSC, there's a community C-Choco resource, and we've actually recently taken over that resource to help bring it up to the same level as some of these other providers. And I think that was back in May. But you can also use Octopus Deploy with Chocolatey, Box Starter, SCCM if you want to go that route. And the great thing about Chocolatey is as you move from one of these technologies to another, maybe you're going to a more modern automation approach, you get to bring your Chocolatey packages with you because they are independent deployment artifacts. Coming into some of the reporting, Chocolatey has the ability to tell you, again, beyond programs and features, about things that it is managing and the versions of those things. Also, in this particular report where we're adding include programs, it's going to tell us about everything that Chocolatey is not managing yet, as we like to say. And we also, here we see a very first commercial feature, package audit. And so one of the great things that Chocolatey can do for us is as we're installing those things with Chocolatey for Business, we're able to also see who installed it when it was installed. Now, if you were to go to programs and features, you could get a nice list of when a particular piece of software was installed. If you, a lot of those are MSIs. If you go into the event log, you can pull out who was installed by, but really getting an overall view in a really easy way is tremendously difficult, and we've just made it automatic. So we also carry the history with that, so we're able to report on, when that last version was installed and who also brought it there. Excuse me. So another thing, when you do look at programs and features, a lot of times that's going to represent only 50 to 80% of the software that's on a machine. Now, Chocolatey is able to flip a switch so that we can provide that same view that Chocolatey has, which is much, much more accurate about all that software, to programs and features. And so when we have those software, again, those installer packages like Launcher here that has an underlying native installer, it got put into programs and features. But something like sysinternals or screen to GIF, it does not have a native installer. We can actually represent those things as Chocolatey managed entries over in programs and features as well. And so it makes the reporting on some of these legacy inventory reporting systems much more accurate, right? And, you know, a nice side effect here is when we are putting those things in there, you can actually go directly to programs and features and uninstall these Chocolatey managed entries. When it comes to logging, a lot of times with Chocolatey, it's going to be capturing very, very detailed information by default, which really reduces a lot of the rollback that you might have to do in a situation where you deploy out to 50 to 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 machines. Invariably with Windows, you know, a few of those are going to fail. 9 times out of 10, it probably is a pending reboot, but you never know. And so when you're able to take a look at those logs are able to really provide information to show you what you may need to do to move forward. When it comes to out-of-date software, so one of the things that you can do with Chocolatey is actually be able to see what's out of date with this Choco list. I'm sorry, Choco outdated, and that way, if you're running on maintenance Windows or you're just waiting to take an upgrade, you can get a really nice view of everything that's going to get upgraded that's being managed with Chocolatey. Now, you see false at the end of all of these. False just tells us whether or not this particular application is pinned to an old version. So Chocolatey supports the concept of pinning. So if I needed to install Java 6 and keep it on Java 6, I could do that and I could pin it. In the business edition, I could also give it a reason. So when other people are in there, they can see why. And it'll show up in this report with true. And so that's what that false is about. So when it comes to creating software deployment packages, as we like to call them, when it comes to Chocolatey, new package or NUPKG file, that's what we call packages. And everything else is software binaries, right? And so if you took that package, you renamed it to a zip file, you'd be able to unpack that archive and you would see a new spec in there that would have the metadata. Many times you're going to see PowerShell in there, and you're also going to see runtime binaries and native installers as well. So when it comes to creating packages, one of the big things that we have is the ability to very easily do that. And we provide this Choco New experience. Choco New experience does have a lot of help and interweave documentation, and we're going to show you that once we get there. And you can also create your own packaging templates as well. Another way about this is Package Builder. And so after talking to organizations for a few years, we started to realize that, you know, once everything was set up, it was smooth. But when you're taking 100+ apps and bringing them into Chocolatey packaging, there's a bit of a ramp up, right? And so if I was creating a package, if you were creating a package through Choco New, you would see that process when you know everything you need to know. Can take between 5 to 10 minutes, could take upwards of an hour or more as you're learning. Package Builder can actually do the same thing in about 5 seconds. So fully unattended, ready to go software deployment in about 5 seconds. It's blazing fast. And what it's doing, it's looking over that installer, it's determining everything it needs to know, and it's generating everything. So you can point this to an archive of installers and zips and all of that, and it'll be able to go through there. And about 70% of the software that's out there is going to be able to fully automate. And for the things that it's not, maybe it's a customized installer, you're going to get a to-do list. And that to-do list is just going to give you the steps additionally that you're going to need to take to finish that package out. A lot of times it's just asking for those silent arguments. And if it's something like SQL Server, Visual Studio, or Office, in those cases, you're going to need to provide an XML file. Chocolatey is not going to be able to provide that. So it's going to give you that to-do list again. Another thing that we've seen a lot of organizations doing over the years is taking packages from the community repository and bringing them internal and wanting them to be 100% offline and reliable. It's not enough just to hook up a remote repository and cache those packages locally, because they reach out to the internet at runtime. And we'll get into that. We'll talk about why that constraint is there for the community repository in a little while. But Package Internalizer is able to take those packages that do need internet usage at runtime and be able to completely internalize them so that they are 100% offline and reliable. And you can do that in 2 ways. When you run it, you can actually choose to have those binaries embedded into the package, or you could push those up separately and point to them on a Artifactory binary repository as well. So a lot of times, when people see these features, they're kind of curious, how does this work? And so I'd like to introduce my friend Shaya. Shaya. All right. Another thing that we have is our package synchronizer. And so I'm sure that a lot of you that have used Chocolatey in the past, you've installed a package that was an installer package and installed something into programs and features. And then for some reason, that software was manually uninstalled outside of Chocolatey or upgraded. And you notice that the package was still there, still in that old version. So that's where our autosync comes in. It's able to see more of that. Again, open source is very strictly about package management, and so all of those changes for those packages and installers do need to come through Chocolatey. And in the licensed editions, we allow more of that system integration. We're actually looking at the right state of the world, which is what's in programs and features, and being able to track that state in those packages as well. And so here you see it says I'm removing the 1Password package because it was uninstalled outside of Chocolatey. Another feature, this is where that we go into that yet. This is allowing us to very quickly take over management of everything in programs and features that Chocolatey is not yet managing, right? So that's our Choco Sync, and does everything right on that box. It generates the packaging, baselines it to the Chocolatey install, all on the fly. I will say with this particular thing, one of the things that we're going to be adding into Chocolatey is package indexing, and that's going to make Chocolatey blazing fast for searches and all of that. Once we have that, we're going to allow ChocoSync to look back to your sources to see if you have a 7-zip 16.2 package, as the image here shows. And if it does, it'll just use that. Otherwise, it will go back to that generating that packaging on the fly. So the other features, we're going to see a couple of these if we have time, but these are all open source. One of the biggest things is if you have functionality that you want to bring into Chocolatey for those installs and you want to keep rewriting it inside of every single Chocolatey install or uninstall, you have the ability to extend the functionality of Chocolatey with Chocolatey extensions. And those are PowerShell modules, and Chocolatey will load those up just as if they were part of Chocolatey itself. And so you can use those, take advantage of that. Also, when you want to pass install arguments directly through to the installer, you have the ability to customize those packages in that way. And you can also use package parameters for being able to pass in like license keys and other things that you want to manage through files, registry settings, or other things, or maybe also pass to that installer. So some of the other features, we're not going to concentrate too much on any of these, so we can get right into looking at that integration, but lots and lots of features in Chocolatey for Business. On a roadmap, one of the big things that we're going to be adding that's really going to present quite a large diversification between that open source and that Chocolatey for Business is a central management UI. There's a web UI where you're going to be able to go in and get a dashboard where it's going to be aggregating all these reports into one location, and then also giving you a nice state of the software inside of your organization. But you'll also get a console, and that's going to bring remote management to Chocolatey itself. And that could be deployments, phase deployments, a lot of things we're going to be adding into this central management UI over the next year and a half. Now, the deploy, Choco Deploy, that's a command line, being able to also do those remote deployments with Chocolatey by itself. So we're looking to support Windows Nano and WSA as well, but Windows Nano has the .NET Core runtime, so we got a little bit of work to do there. Currently on our prioritization schedule, that's going to be in early 2018. There's also on Windows 10, Windows Server 2016, a built-in package manager called OneGet, or package management, which is interesting. They chose package management because it does not manage any packages whatsoever. It only has providers that it hooks in and works with. Now, we are looking to support package management. Unfortunately, we have to do that with our open source community. This isn't something that a lot of our customers are really looking to do there. So we're working with our open source community to get that finished off. With package enhancements, some of that's also up in the top over here on the right. Pack validation. So a lot of people that are deploying out to the community repository, they get a nice thing called the package validator, which goes through and actually checks the quality. We want to bring that right back to Chocolatey so you can actually get that same thing when you run Choco Pack. And that'll just tell you all the nice quality and everything that goes along with that. Also, GPG signing, probably authentic code signing as well. And those two aspects are going to bring a little bit more traceability and also supporting, customers wanting to lock things down to only things that are signed. Package grid, deferred installer, those are really about being able to very quickly bring packages to things. Deferred installers about being able to push things out and then have them hold for some reason. It could be it's waiting for an approval to come through before it's going to actually prefer the installer. It's waiting on a maintenance window before it would do that, and also support on other platforms we're looking to do eventually. So integration and use case, and a lot of where you're going to be using Artifactory is because you're an organization and you're looking to do that internal use. We always say that when it comes to Chocolatey, you got to understand that the community repository is the tip of the iceberg, right? It is in the public domain. It has distribution rights, and it can be fully reliable. We're actually going to see that in the next slide, but we'll just talk about how there's a much bigger, in hundreds and maybe even thousands of organizations are using Chocolatey internally. They never touch the community repository. They build their own packages, and to put it into perspective, back in like 2012, 2013, when we had about just over 1,000 packages, there was another organization out there with about, say, 2,500 packages already, and that was one organization. Because it's under the bottom of the iceberg, we actually don't know how big it is. So,
and there is another scenario that we're going to talk about in a second about distribution, but not necessarily public, open source, and on the community package repository. But let's talk about community package repository first, and then we'll get back to that kind of a build-up for our sequel webinar about Bintray.
Right on. Yeah, we can hit on right after this slide. So the community repository has a lot of packages on it. It's been up for about 6 years this month, actually. And it has gone through moderation for over 3 years. Everything goes through a lot of automation, goes through VirusTotal, where it's pushing the binaries and the packages up to be checked by 50 to 60 antivirus scanners. Even with all of that and all the safety stuff that goes into that, it just can't be fully reliable. Because it's a public repository, a lot of the packages don't get to actually contain the software they represent. They have to reach out to the internet to download that from the official locations at runtime. That's where distribution rights and copyright laws come into play. An organization that's putting packages on Artifactory doesn't have to be subject to that same thing because everything's internal. So they can just go ahead and embed those binaries right into the package or push them up somewhere internal and use that from there. And another reason that we see a lot of organizations that want to avoid that community repository is because they want to control that whole process, right? There's a mistrust for anything that you can't control. And you want that 100% reliability. And so that's where Artifactory comes into play. That allows you to create packages for internal use, internalize those existing packages from the community repository. You can actually do that internalization if you're going to reuse packages from the community repository, either using Package Internalizer or manually. We do have a guide on our documentation. I'll show you how to do that manually. One thing that, again, we don't recommend that you would just bring packages down to cache them because they're still going to reach out to the internet unless they're internalized. So that kind of keeps you from using that remote repository.
So this is, we spoke about two types of scenarios. One is really community and, stuff that is accessible to everybody and can be published to the community package repository. It can be consumed from there. And then we kind of went to another extreme, which is, okay, I only use it in my organization, in my intranet, and it's all disconnected and possibly internalized and can be run completely offline. There is a third scenario that we are not going to talk about today, but we are going to talk about it in our next webinar, and that's a case of private distribution, when you actually want to distribute the packages that you create, but you cannot put them on the community package repository for some of the reasons that you mentioned, and there are many others like non-public visibility, etc. And for that, we in JFrog developed a special platform, Bintray, which is a distribution hub that is intended for those use cases where you want to distribute something, but you first want to control where it is going, and also have stuff like entitlements, expirable links, etc., etc. So we're going to hold another webinar, I guess, in probably a couple of months from now, considering all the timelines, and this is the use case that we will discuss then, how you actually publish your packages both on open and on the community package repository, and on more private but still CDN and still cloud environment like Bintray.
Awesome. So one of the other things when it comes to Artifactory and Chocolatey, we're actually going to see this a bit, but currently you're setting up a local NuGet repository. So that's the way that you're going to interact with Chocolatey. There are some NuGet specifics in there that we're going to hope to work with JFrog on a little bit, so we can get a little bit more chocolatey, a little bit sweeter there. And
yeah, so that's in the workings. We will have a dedicated Chocolatey repository types with the right appropriate documentation and the right set me up guides that actually make sense to Chocolatey, and not necessarily for NuGet. But I also would like you, maybe not now in the Q&A section, to speak a little bit about difference between NuGet and Chocolatey as of today. But that's for the Q&A probably.
Yeah. All right, so with that, let's jump over here and get, that's what I was looking for. So I'm going to get a little closer here. So I'm going to stop the share for just a second. We're going to jump in and get right up on this demo area that we have here. So hopefully you can see that now. What we have is a set of files, and we currently have Chocolatey set up. And so the first thing a lot of folks do, they're going to create a package. So the way that you would do that on the open source side, you'd call Choco new and then give it a name, and it's going to generate some files for you. And so we continually add more back into that, especially for documentation and things. And what you're going to see in Chocolatey in the new version, 0.10.8, there's an additional to-do list along with these other files. And that to-do list is a lot of what we normally talk about in presentations like this. And so the very first thing you want to do is you're going to go through this, what we call it a decision matrix, and you're going to determine how you're going to use this package. And so we're going to walk you through the way that you would set that up, and whether you're going to that or the community repository with it. And then also the way, the type of package that you're going to set up. A lot of the packages out there are what we call installer packages, but there are also those portable and those zip type packages as well. And then, of course, there's other types that you can set up as well. Now, some of this we're going to talk about right now, about how to fill up those contents. And then, of course, there is a way to test your Chocolatey packages in a nice environment through Vagrant using either Hyper-V or VirtualBox. And that is that test environment. And then we also have a workshop. And so you can actually go through this workshop on your own. We also tend to give this workshop a few times a year at conferences as well. And you can go through this workshop, and it's going to show you how to do quite a bit with Chocolatey. We like to say by the time that you complete this workshop, you're pretty much going to be an expert as far as Chocolatey goes. And so now let's just step over here from that to the README. The README is it's kind of helpful maybe the first couple of times you're using it. Now, a lot of our documentation is what we like to say, really good reference documentation. Maybe not so good at the walkthrough and conceptual documentation, but we've heard that. We've gotten that feedback. We're actually working on it to make it a lot better walkthrough documentation. Now, one thing in the README it does have is this section called environment variables, where you get a nice reference of all of the different environment variables that you can use inside of your scripts. We've got a couple of PowerShell scripts here. There's also a license file and a verification file. Those are related to the community repository only. So those are the first things to go internally. In the new spec, you'll see that one of the things that we do here is package specific section in the metadata. We do a lot of interweave documentation in here to really help those folks that are just starting out to really get this set up. Software specific section as well, and then also the dependencies. And the dependencies is really maybe a strong point when it comes to package management over other forms of software management. So if you could imagine for some reason, let's say that Adobe Reader here needed to depend on Java and it needed to be version 6 but less than version 8. Now imagine if Java also had dependencies and trying to manage that in anything other than something that was as simple as a nice line passed in here. And when Chocolatey sees that, we like to say at the last responsible moment, it's going to make sure that everything gets installed in the proper order, right? And it does it almost seamlessly. So we have a before modify script, and that's before upgrade, before uninstall from the current package that's there. That you're able to shut down processes and services. And then we have an install and an uninstall. I cannot talk today. And so in that uninstall, again, we're going to make note of 9 times out of 10, you're probably not going to need this, but in case you do, you would just come in and fill out a couple bits of information here, and that would be that display name that's in programs and features, and MSI, and this is for that installer package, right? And if it's not MSI, you're going to be figuring out what those silent arguments are. Otherwise, you already have them set for you. And then there's some other functions you can do. And if you are doing another type of package, you're pretty much going to remove this and then add in what you need there. Do keep in mind, it is just PowerShell, so you can do pretty much anything you want here, right? And so in the install script here, we're going to walk you through how to set this up. When you are doing internal use, we're going to recommend you embed those files directly into the package. Of course, we call that putting those in embedding. And right up to the size of about a new package file that's about 1 gigabyte. That's what we're going to recommend because that is the most reliable experience, having everything it needs once it gets that packaged up. You could also push those files out to a shared location. If you're using, of course, Artifactory, you can also put that up to a binary repository and then downloads at runtime. And that's still going to be pretty reliable because if you're able to hit Artifactory to get the package, it's pretty reasonable to assume that you're also going to be able to hit Artifactory to get those binaries as well separately. So when you come in here, if you're using that file location, if you're embedding or using a shared location, what we're going to recommend you use is install Chocolatey install package, as we're mentioning here. Now, the difference between install Chocolatey package and install Chocolatey install package, I know naming is hard, is that the install package, it's going to actually use the files where they are, where install Chocolatey package will try to go and get those files from a remote location, even if it's on a share, even if it's in the package itself, and then copy that to a temp location that we call the cache. And so that's not always preferred. And then just taking a look here, we have a couple of things. We're not going to spend too much time on this, but we have some installers here, and we're going to go through and use Package Builder here to go ahead and quickly create some packages for us, and we'll see about how that works out. And so all it's doing here, keeps wanting to bump over there, is it's going through, and we've asked it to look into our archive here, and for all the supported types, instead of giving it a name, we're just going to point directly to the file. We're going to say, Chocolatey, you're pretty smart. Why don't you figure out everything you need to make that package fully remote, fully unattended and deployable, right? And so that's what it's doing right now. It's going through there as well. Now, again, I'll remind you, again, 70% of the installers out there is going to be able to create these fully unattended. Of course, in our demo here, it's 100%. So just keep that in mind. Another thing that we can do is if we don't want to embed those files, we can either say we're going to download that from a URL, maybe put it on a shared location, and we're going to add in this additional use original location. Now, that's what it's going to bake into the package, whatever we pass in. So it goes without saying, please don't use localhost. Please don't use an admin share. That's what we have for our example here in this environment, but don't do that. That's bad. So as we take a look at some of the stuff that it's done for us here, one of the things that we can see that we have new packages, and then we have some folders and files that it's created. Up here is the packaging, down here is the compiled version of those packages. That's what we're going to be pushing up to our repository. And so we take a look at, say, the Puppet agent here. We can just rename it to a zip, like I was saying. We go in, and there's that new spec, and there's that MSI, and then there's that PowerShell script that contains the instructions on how to get that MSI installed or upgraded. And then we can just kind of jump in, take a look at what that looks like here in the actual packaging. And when it comes to package builder versus open source, you're not going to get a ton when it comes to MSIs because, the silent arguments are pretty standard. I think that's why people like MSIs. The one thing that you do get is we're going to take all those MSI properties, we're going to extract them all out, save you a little bit of time. I'm doing that with like Orca or something else, and we're going to extract all those so you can just bring them out of this comments section where we drop them, bring them right up here and put them into the package. So let me just drop that there. And so now we've set that. Now, one of the things about silent arguments is those are the default silent arguments. I can actually append to them at runtime. So I could pass in this Puppet Master server property at runtime instead of putting it into the package. Or I could completely override these arguments and provide my own. So I have a little bit of options there. Now, one of the things I want to show you is over here we got our 1Password, right? And so in 1Password, that's an executable installer. Again, Chocolatey is able to figure that one out as well. So I was able to figure out that was set up. It's all those really good arguments to get that installed. So as we look at what we got here, we got that 1Password. We're actually going to go ahead and install that. So take a look. And there's 1Password. Now let's do Choco install 1Password. Password, if I can type. And I'm going to say auto confirm it and go ahead and use this local location for that. So we're going to get a little bit of testing right before we push that up to our repository that we have. So coming over here, we did get it installed successfully. And now we're going to go ahead and push this up to a repository. And for that, we're going to flip over here. And we're going to go through this process of actually setting up a repository. We got that Chocolatey local in case things don't go so well. So I got to get our username in here and our password. We'll just show you how this process goes. If I get the password right, we'll be right in. If I get the password wrong, we're going to be in trouble. All right, and so what you'll get when you come over to the admin section off of the dashboard here, you'll want to come down here where you get this nice thing up and you're looking for local repositories. Then you want to create a new repository. You come on over here to NuGet. Currently, we're just going to call this Choco. And we're going to give it a similar name, Choco Local. And go ahead and, yep, everything looks good. And we come back in here, taking a look at Choco Local. We want to make sure that the permissions and other things are set nicely. One of the nice things that we can see is we can actually see effective permissions. I want to say that's under something. So we've set up this Choco Access user, and it also has this new group that we've created called deployers. And deployers is just giving that group the permission to, let's see if it shows it here. Yeah, so they get access to do deployments, right? So they can push up as well. And we're going to probably get to use that user, hopefully. And so when we take a look at our local repository here, thinking here, nope.
You'll see it in the tree browser, the effective permissions.
Yes.
In the artifact browser. Yep.
So here we can see effective permissions. So we can actually see what groups have access to do what. So this is pretty fantastic when you're trying to figure out what your permissions are. And for users and groups, in case somebody comes and says, hey, I can't push to this repository, you can really get a good view of that. And then you can see the targets that are there. We've added the deployment permissions, so we've given access for those users to be able to push up to any repository, right, that we create, and then set the deployers group into that, giving them the access to do deploying, right? So pretty handy, right? Now we're actually going to attempt to use this repository. We're going to push a package up to it. When you come over here to the dashboard gives you this nice looking bit of information here. You can also add in your password. It'll show you your password down here. We're going to go ahead and do that. We're actually going to set it up with admin, and that'll show us not that just that, but it's going to show us our API key as well. And so when we're going to add this, we're going to need that information. So first thing we're going to need that source that we're going to be pushing to. So we're going to go ahead and copy that, and we're going to bring that back over here. And so if we take a look at our source list, one of the things we're going to see is there is an internal server. Well, that's an interesting view. I actually want to see that through maybe a different way. So I'm going to bring that up in the Chocolatey GUI here. And we're going to come over here to settings, click on sources here, and we're just going to add a new one. So click new, and we'll call it Choco Local. We're going to give it that source URL. And we're going to say, we're actually going to give it access to self-service. We're going to say the proxy is bypassed. We're going to bump that priority to 1. So we want that to be one of the highest priorities that we have there. So we're going to have to add that. We're going to go ahead and remove this other one that we had. So we'll just have that one with the highest priority there. And then, so we're going to come right back over here. And then now when we take a look at our lists, we'll see that we do have that Chocolatey local that we can push up to. And that's how we're going to access it in one way. But we also need to go ahead and push a package up to it. So coming back here, again, looking, sorry, Choco LS, LS, right there we have a package that we can push. So we're going to Choco push, and then we're going to look for the name of this package, 1Password, and then we're going to push it up to that source again. The source for Artifactory is actually the same for push as it is for other operations. Now, not a lot of repositories all can say that, but that makes it really easy, keeps it from being difficult to use, reduces a little bit of that confusion there.
You can also create a virtual repository that will kind of gather together multiple local and remote repositories, and then not only you will have one URL for push and pull under one repository, you can actually get one URL for push and pull for any of your repositories.
Fantastic. Yes, yes. The virtual repositories are very cool. They have that nice aggregated repository there.
Right. So once you proxy the community package repository, and you have local repository, and you actually want to access them in a single point, then you can actually do it using the virtual repository.
All right, and so here we've just pushed that up. And so we should be able to jump right into this repository, take a look at it. We'll come over here to the Repository Explorer or Artifact Repository browser. And so in here, when we pull this down, we can see there is a 1Password package, right? And so we should be able to install that. So let's get rid of the package that we've already installed. Now we could do Choco uninstall for this. We're going to use a nice quick trick on that where we just take it here and then come back over and run any Chocolatey command. And,
so you provided an API key in the command line when you run the push, but you can actually do that in the Chocolatey GUI. There are fields there for username and password as well.
Yep. So we could do, so instead of push, we could say Choco API key, right? Or set API key if we want. And then we point it to the particular source. And then this way, when we push to that URL, we don't have to provide it anymore. So it's just going to be able to push to that. It'll put that key for us. And that's how we go about keeping it off the command line as well. And so you can do that there. Now we've gotten back to where we don't have that. Let's actually, let's bring a couple of packages down from the community repository as well. So one of those we're going to bring down is Notepad++. And then let's go ahead and bring down Adobe Reader, and then we'll just do internalize. And what we're going to see it do is it's going to reach out and remove basically all of that need for internet resources. And so I'll jump in here. I'll get this one open. You can see it's bringing in this non-redistributable file. And it's embedding it into the package. Now we have the choice to embed in the package. We can also say, we want the resources location to be something in Artifactory so that we can push up to Artifactory as well to pull from that binary repository at runtime. And I'll just jump over here and also look at Notepad++. We can see that it was able to pull in these non-redistributables. And then when we come back over here, it's going to ask us to reopen this file because it has had some changes to it. It is now using that file internalized into the package, and it's changed install Chocolatey package to behave more like install Chocolatey install package with this use original location. So it's not trying to copy that file around. And also that Notepad++, it sees that we're using splatting, which is this at. And so it adds that parameter in a different way when it rewrites that package. It is worth noting it does go get all those dependencies by default, and it's going to internalize everything up the chain. So for Notepad++ here, we're going to want to push up 3 packages. And so we're just going to do that Choco push again.
So before you're running push, Rob, there is something I wanted to reiterate again. So you didn't use the remote repository of Artifactory to proxy the community package repository and download the Notepad++ from there because you wanted to make a change in it and then make it available locally, and that change would be internalizing it.
Yeah, so that it doesn't have any internet access. That's what we're trying to get accomplished when we do it that way. Because otherwise, when we run it even internally, when we've just done that proxying or bringing that local cache from the community repository, it's still going to want to reach out to the internet at runtime. And a lot of organizations, that's kind of a no-go. They want to make sure that it is fully using resources all in their environment. So that's the reason that we did the internalization and then the push.
But if I don't care about this probably call home functionality or whatever it does, having it installed through a remote repository in Artifactory will be actually the preferred way.
It could be, yeah.
Because then you proxy it, you have it installed in Artifactory, and every additional install in your organization will obviously be faster, and you don't need to do this pull push unless you actually change something.
Correct. And so we're actually going to flip over to a non-administrator just to show this a little bit here. And then we're going to bring up, again, that Chocolatey GUI. So we're going through here, look for Chocolatey GUI, right? And just to show you that this is a non-administrator, we're going to open up that folder. We're going to go try to install that package. Let's see if we can find it. So there was, what was it? 1Password. We created a package for, we pushed that up. We're going to try to give that an install. You're going to see if we don't have access to do that. And so we'll jump over here to Choco Local, and we're actually going to try to install this application as a non-administrator. So here you can see we don't have it installed, and we're going to click on this, and then we're going to give it an install. We're going to let it do its thing. You're going to see some red text here, but it is reaching back to that background service agent. It's letting that service agent actually perform that install for us. And then we do get an installation. And so you can see here, it's been installed. Just to prove that, we'll come back over here and refresh, and there it is. So we've installed it as a non-administrator through Chocolatey self-service. And so now we can jump back over here to the administrator. And we'll take a look. Back in this particular repository, and what we should see in here when we do a refresh is we should see we have a whole bunch of packages in here now. Few packages there that we'll be able to use Chocolatey to install. Maybe we have 1Password installed and we realize that we do need to upgrade 1Password. Maybe it's a security issue or something. One of the additional things that we can do with Chocolatey for Business is just right-click on that new version of that executable and create a Chocolatey package there, and then take that, push that up to Artifactory as well. We'll just bring that back over here, and then we'll go ahead and push the new version up. Get that up there, and then we can use that to push out to our environment. And so very quickly, we would be able to protect ourselves. So we can do a Choco upgrade, and that would be 1Password. And minus source for this. This source, we've called it Choco Local in our repository here. And so we can just point directly to that. And it's going to see that we have a new version of 1Password. We're going to get that upgraded. And we can use other things to manage that remote deployment out to our organization, so we can get that across everything. Last thing I'll show you, we'll jump over to questions and other things, is when we are looking to do a little bit more customization, we can also bring up that package builder UI and also be able to provide, we can do all this on the command line, but sometimes it's helpful to have a nice interface, especially when that command line could become very long, because there's a lot of things that we could be setting. And some of these settings do get put in by package builder as part of its detection. Some of those things it's not going to be able to create for us. So say Chrome as a browser here, and then go ahead and click generate. It's going to generate that packaging for us. And we'll just try to jump in here and take a look at this new spec, just so you can see that it does get that Chrome as a browser brought right into it. So, all right. So do we want to take a look at anything else in here, or do we want to jump to Q&A?
Yeah, no, I think this is very cool, and we have like 5 minutes, so probably let's talk about a couple of questions and wrap this up. So the first question, the one that I asked you before, is and that's towards JFrog introducing a proper Chocolatey package type in Artifactory. The question is, what is the difference between between Nougat and Chocolatey?
Yes, Nougat. I remember somebody asked another question in there we wanted to share. The difference between Nougat and Chocolatey. Nougat is a a package manager, but really a software library. So all of those DLLs and stuff that you want to use. Package manager for .NET and also C++ now, I believe. But you would use Nougat to get DLLs and other framework library types of things so that you can build tools that you would release on Chocolatey. That's kind of the best way to say it. So when it comes to Chocolatey, Chocolatey is, let's see here, pricing. That's where somebody asked a question to see any matrix to understand the difference. Chocolatey is really about those tools, those applications, and other things you want to deploy. Nougat is really about that developer experience and being able to bring in development libraries. And a really nice link here. You come to pricing if you're really trying to see all the different things you can do. Click on compare editions. It's going to bring up this comparison matrix. That'll show you all the nice differences. Unfortunately, there's a lot more that of course, Chocolatey for Business and some of these things can do that just don't have a place here, but you can kind of see that as you look through some of those areas. And so one of those is if you want to lock down Chocolatey so that only administrators can use Chocolatey, you can do that in Chocolatey for Business very easily. If you want to lock down certain commands like chocolatey, you'd be able to do that as well.
So, and more on a technical question, what will be on a technical level, what will be the package type difference between Chocolatey and Nougat, except of the different commands, of course. I remember you mentioned there are some additions to the standard Nougat functionality that Chocolatey provides.
Yeah, so what Nougat does is, again, back towards that software library, where Chocolatey needs some additional things. So some of the signing aspects we think are coming to Nougat, but we're going to also make sure that GPG signing is there for that traceability. And a couple of the other things in there is that we've extended it because we needed to do more things with it, more things that are specific to a machine package manager. And in some of those, it's just information that's available when it comes to that package. Some of the additional things that we are going to be adding is, say you have OS-specific dependencies instead of just general dependencies for a package. You want to be sure that maybe some of those dependencies apply to only certain OSs. And so that's something that we're going to be adding. Another thing is, we're going to bring proper release versions into Chocolatey. And so to be honest, we've added it. It is a completely dark feature and it doesn't work anywhere, so don't start using it. But we're going to introduce that next year when the time is right, and so you'll be able to use proper release versioning as well. When you have a package and you just you don't want to change the version of software, but you need a fix because you fixed something in the package, and so you'll be able to set up a release version.
Oh, this is cool. Okay, I think we have a couple of more questions. So let's see here. It's a question about licensing of Chocolatey. So Rob, take a look at it and let me know if you want to take it online now, or maybe it's more appropriate for an email response later.
Okay, so Chocolatey itself is, and going back to that pricing, about $16 per machine per year. When we talk about Chocolatey for Business, we actually have the pricing right here, and so it's very approachable for organizations. A lot of organizations we talk to say that we probably don't charge enough, but we're not trying to make a lot of money here. We're really trying to get a lot of organizations using better tools, right? And so that's where Chocolatey for Business comes in. If you're looking at Pro, to understand the difference, if you're an organization and you're looking to use Chocolatey, Pro is not for you. That's only for a user, a personal type of license. And so ignore that pricing for the most part. Look over at the Chocolatey for Business. If you are an MSP, we also have options for that. And the pricing is much more approachable for managed service providers. I hope that answers your question. The question was whether Chocolatey being used in a production situation where 8-unit server being used, and so I'm hoping that was a good answer for you. it looks like it. So.
All right. Okay. So, Rob, thank you very much. We're kind of out of time. So, it was just great, and we learned a lot about Chocolatey and integration with Artifactory. So, as I mentioned, the first part of the webinar was on more of a consuming of what Chocolatey is and how to consume it, and we will definitely do the follow-up, which will be more targeted to creating packages and publishing them either on the community package repository or on Bintray. So stay tuned to this announcement. The recording is already live, and you can access it starting now on JFrog's YouTube. Rob will also we will also add the link to the slides in the description, and you will get them separately on a follow-up email. And stay tuned for the part 2. Rob, thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to host you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Okay, so thank you very much, and bye-bye.